It actually has changed a lot, actually, because Angela and I went up to visit Wollaton Hall in 2013, and we had a very kind of careful look around the house, and we were asked to put forward a proposal. So we put forward what seemed to be quite a concrete proposal at the time, but actually it was rather vague when we looked at it 3 years later. But it's the idea of the architecture and the history of the building, and sort of translating a kind of collage of those ideas and thoughts into movement and objects and images. Well, we chose the prospect room, which is the room at the highest level, because it's very light. It's a very you're on top of the hill and you're on top of the house, and it is clearly a sort of it was the room where the owner felt very proud of his estate and his kind of belongings. And I think it's the room where you can see out on all four sides. So it's a real position of advantage, and it's also from the stories that you read about Wollaton Hall, it's also a position of defence, because they could see the kind of the rebels coming when there was sort of a threat to them. I think also the way that you get up to the prospect room through the stone stairs is also a very lovely approach. So it's very tight and it's hard and it's cold, and then suddenly you're in a very sort of airy, spacious room with a sort of a grandeur. And it's also practical reasons we chose that, because we've actually got some space. There was no other exhibits in the room, so it was a nice empty space. Yeah. We've read about it, and we've looked very carefully at the house, and then I went up to see the Middleton collection, which is the embroidery that has been collected of the same period. So in a way, it's a kind of it's a diffusion of lots of different bits. There's no one particular incident or piece of history, or it's kind of a lot of different bits. But in terms of the architecture, we're very aware that there's hierarchy. So there's the kind of dark basement, and then there's the kind of the middle bit where it's kind of there's both grand and behind the scenes, and then up to this very fabulous room at the top. So the architecture sort of expresses the hierarchy, and the hidden bits where the servants ran up and down, and the kind of the open, gracious spaces. So we were looking at the differences, and we were also, I was aware of some of the doors are covered with red felt. And it seemed to me that the red felt, nobody seemed to know why there was red felt on the doors, which is quite a nice sort of question mark. But it seemed to me to be the dividing line between the servants and the kind of the higher classes, as it were. So in some of the bits I've used red felt as that sort of denoter.
It's a collar, or possibly a child's cape. It's never been firmly identified as one or the other. But you can see, if you look closely, it's actually got two layers on it. So it's got a smaller collar-like thing, and then a larger one around the edge. And again, it's trimmed with bobbin lace. Black work again, but it's just very beautiful. There's quite a lot of the embroidery that has disintegrated, but a lot of it is in remarkably good condition and very beautiful. I think the pattern, and I'd wear something, a jacket or something with this pattern on today. I think it's a really lovely pattern.
Yeah, I definitely like the pattern on that one.
If you look at the bobbin lace on this collar, it's very detailed and looks almost Elizabethan, the way that it zigzags in and out with the almost Van Dyck's type lace. This would have been a fashionable piece at its time, but by the end of that century, of the 17th century, they were more worn by older women who remembered the earlier fashions, as women now often wear fashions that they wore when they were younger.
And I suppose the idea of how long it takes to do embroidery, the leisure classes had time to sit and embroider and spend a huge amount of time making a bonnet to sleep in, for instance. Whereas in contrast, the servants none of their clothes survived because they were worn and they were worn and they were worn and they were handed down to the next in line. So they always wore out. There was nothing left. And I think they only had one sort of Sunday best, and then they had one, outfit for every day. So there was no choice in the matter. It was very, very restricted.
For me, the journey has been very strongly influenced by all the stories of the dynamics between the staff and the people living here, and I get this feeling of quite pressured or quite dense and contracted, which also is what I recognized most in the tasks that Angela gave us. So it's this ongoing conversations between memories or visuals from the building, stuff that or text that Angela had written, the physical experience and the inner experience of compression and the difficulty.
Finally.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Good. Okay.
So in particular for this work, coming to Wollaton Hall, one of these key aspects, of course, historically is the lace collection that is housed here, and the beauty of that. I was very charmed in a sense by Caroline's response to it as well, and how through her eyes I am viewing that lace collection. Really stunned by how beautiful it is, and the images that she picked up when she came to visit. She was showing me all the images of the collection. So initially, when we were first talking about ideas for this project, we had that very clearly in our minds about the idea of something that's, the detail of needlework, the detail of labour, the detail of the marks themselves on the fabric, and whether that had an immediate direct correlation with dancers moving, and one could make a kind of direct link about some kind of weave or some sort of design, let's say. I would say now the ideas have moved away from that in the final kind of coming together, but the nature of the lace still is quite important in the overall, obviously, the overall work, which is a kind of coming together of all these three disciplines of film, movement and the objects that Caroline is creating.